Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist First and Weather here. It is August 23rd, 2020, and we have two systems to talk about. So, again, unusually busy. Very rarely do you see the threat for two landfalls of tropical systems just a couple of days apart. So, again, this is very rare and definitely a lot to talk about. So, let's get right into it. So, this right here is Hurricane Marco. So, the latest advisory does have this as a very weak hurricane. And as you can see with the satellite loop, this is a visible high res. You can see it's very well organized, or not terribly organized, but it is definitely much more organized than my last video where we had lots of pulse thunderstorm activity and just in general, not really too much thunderstorm activity. But as you can see now, we have lots of towering cloud tops all around the storm, really indicating its strengthening and its overall healthier structure, which is definitely bad news for people that are in the path of this potential hurricane when making landfall. Now, here is the official NOAA 1 p.m. advisory. As you can see, it is moving north-northwest at 14 miles per hour. It has sustained winds at 75 miles per hour, so it is a very weak Category 1 hurricane. And the NOAA Center does predict that this will maintain hurricane strength before making landfall somewhere near southeast Louisiana or near New Orleans, and then weaken into a tropical storm very quickly, and then make a southwest turn into Texas as a very weak depression. Now, if we look at the ensemble plots, you can see there's relatively good consensus that this will make landfall somewhere in the south or somewhere in the Louisiana area, but we are only about 24 hours out from the system making landfall, and to see this wide a swath of the models is definitely not very common. Usually by 24 hours in, you have a very thin sort of plot of the model is a landfall location about 50 miles wide, but you have essentially a 200-mile wide area of uncertainty still 24 hours out. But it does look like the most likely spot for landfall will be somewhere in southeastern Louisiana. Now, if we look at the intensity plots, you can see that the 12Z run does not have this as a Cat 1 hurricane. If I quickly go and try to see if I can find the latest run input, see if the 18Z has come out. No, it has not come out yet. Oh, one sec, I think it has. This is the 18Z. So as you can see, the 18Z now has actually shifted further to the west, further to the southwest. So this is in direct contrast to what the 12Z run was displaying right here. You can see the 12Z run was right here, but now the 18Z run is all the way to the southwest and into the Texas area. So that's very interesting to see. It might be because the system is going to be a little stronger than anticipated as it has that more westerly component. But again, I think this is a little bit off. I do think the most likely area for landfall will be in the Louisiana area or maybe eastern Texas, but again, I think we're pretty likely to see landfall somewhere in this region right here. Now, if we go to the intensity plot, you can see that most of them do not have it as a Category 1 hurricane, but you can see it weakening quite rapidly after it makes landfall. And again, let me go back to see if they do indeed have the 18Z strength plots. And now you can see, yep, indeed, excuse me, you do have it as a weak Category 1 hurricane, but again, you have them quickly weakening into a strong tropical storm, and then within 24 hours, potentially all the way down into weak tropical storm status before quickly weakening into depression mode. Now, if we switch to the sea surface temperatures, you can see the Gulf of Mexico is very, very warm. You have temperature readings at 31 Celsius, 30 Celsius, right in the area that Marco is expected to go. And these are some of the warmest waters in the globe right now. So this is very conducive for some pretty rapid intensification. And so that's why I would not be surprised if this does strengthen. However, there are a couple of things that are going against Marco's strengthening, which I will discuss later in the video. And if we look at the temperature anomalies, again, you can see a big pocket of above average sea surface temperature anomalies where Marco is expected to make landfall. So this right here is the GFS model. This is the 6Z run right here. You can see that the GFS was predicting landfall in eastern Louisiana, maybe even southern Mississippi, as essentially a very strong tropical storm, maybe a very weak hurricane at 994 millibars. So it was having it as a pretty impressive system. But If we go to the 12Z run, you can see a very dramatic shift. The MLB pressure, 1,004 millibars. That's barely tropical storm status. And if we get closer in time, it doesn't even recognize this as a tropical system by the time it's making landfall. So a very weak, disorganized system. And so that's very interesting to go from what the GFS was showing as a almost hurricane, Category 1 hurricane, just in the 6Z run, all the way now to barely a tropical storm at the 12Z run, is certainly very surprising and interesting, and just goes to show that there still is some unusually high model uncertainty with this system, which you typically do not see this close out to landfall. So again, I think this is definitely an interesting development here. And if we look at the European, you can see the European model is showing the exact same thing. This is the 12Z run, right? So this is now 12Z Sunday. Then if we go to 12Z Monday, does not even recognize this as a tropical system. And by then, it has it making landfall somewhere in western Louisiana or southeast Texas. So that's the western shift we're seeing with the 18Z ensemble plots. So what was looking like landfall here has now shifted a little bit to the west, according to some of the hurricane models and the European model. But again, both models, the GFS and European operational model, showing almost nothing for Marco. And keep in mind, it is currently a Category 1 hurricane, so it would have to undergo some rapid de-intensification and weakening to almost be a weak tropical storm by the time it makes landfall. And I think the reason the models are showing this is because of the very strong shear that Marco is going to encounter. So I'm going to get into that in the next few slides. Now, if we switch gears, this is where I can really show you guys the what the models are thinking in terms of wind shear. This is the GFS and or GEFS ensemble model, and as you can see, this is 12Z Monday. So tomorrow morning around 7 a.m. You can see that Marco is traveling in a northwesterly direction, but the high-level winds at the 250 millibar level are coming straight in, streaking in from the southwest, very fast. And this is a big jet streak we're seeing right here on the a big trough, essentially, in the central portion of the United States. And because of that, you have these strong southwesterly winds really ripping apart Marco, according to the GFS and European model. And that is because with Marco going to the northwest and these winds coming in from the southwest, you essentially have perpendicular wind shear. And that is a very bad scenario if you want strengthening with this system. And this, I think, at the worst, will definitely help to limit its strengthening from going any stronger into a strong Cat 1 or weak Cat 2. So again, I think with those very warm sea surface temperatures, it will prevent this system from completely disintegrating. So that is why I do disagree with the GFS and European a little bit. I do not think it's going to weaken so significantly to the point where it's barely even a tropical storm, but I do think it's not really going to gain strength from here on out till it makes landfall because of this very strong wind shear. And one other thing that I think is not going for is this jet streak. So with those strong southwesterly winds, it is really sort of disorienting the lower level and then upper level axes of the storm, and you can see it's pulling all of the moisture, basically stretching the storm from southwest to northeast. And you can see all the moisture that should be around the storm right here, which would indicate a healthy tropical storm or weak hurricane, is actually all being sucked away from this jet streak right here. And that is really going to leave the storm sort of naked, because it won't really have any sort of moisture source which will really help to sustain it. You can see the dry air, according to the GFS model, already sucking into the system on the southern side because of that jet streak really pushing away all that moist air. And I think with that combined with the wind shear are sort of helping the system really weaken, or are sort of causing the GFS to really point the system to weakening. However, one thing I don't think those models are taking into account are the very warm sea surface temperatures. So I do think this will not significantly weaken. Now, before we switch gears to Tropical Storm Lara, let us go to the this map right here. This is from UWCIMSS. I forget the abbreviation, but regardless, this is a very helpful tool. So right now, it is a Category 1 hurricane. This is inaccurate. It is not a tropical storm. But as the National Weather Service does predict it to maintain Category 1 strength before making landfall in southeast Louisiana, look where it's going into. It's going into a very high wind shear environment. Look at this, 40 knots of wind shear. That is very high wind shear levels. And I think that is why the GFS and European, again, are weakening this system. I do not agree with just how much they're weakening the system, but I am very confident that this system is not going to strengthen into a Cat 2 or really undergo any more strengthening. I think most likely this will just maintain its Cat 1 strength or its weak Category 1 strength and then make landfall somewhere between eastern Texas and southeastern Louisiana. Right now, I think the most likely state is going to be Louisiana for landfall, particularly this area right here. I do think it's going to go a little bit further west than expected, and probably make landfall somewhere right around here. So now let's switch gears. So in summary, for Hurricane Marco, I think that it is not going to strengthen. I think the risk of pretty rapid strengthening or even a little bit is quite low. I think if anything, this will probably maintain strength before making landfall in Louisiana and might even weaken a touch because of that very unusually strong wind shear. Now switching gears to Tropical Storm Lara, we can see that it is rotating quite nicely. There's lots of nice structure, lots of storm development. The center is somewhere right around here, and it originally was expected to potentially make landfall in southeastern Florida, but that has now changed. It most likely is going to go right over Cuba, right over the entire mainland island before entering the clear Gulf of Mexico area where it could really see some intensification. And this is the system where the models are really quite bullish with its intensification, I think, and I'm particularly worried with this one right here. This is the 2 p.m. advisory from NOAA. As you can see, it is a tropical storm right now, moving quite quickly west-northwest at 21 miles per hour. So that should help it to not be completely torn apart over Cuba, as it will be moving quite quickly. But I think if it continues its fast forward moving speed, it won't really have much opportunity for intensification. So that is good news for southeastern Texas and southwestern Louisiana. But you can see that the National Weather Service does keep this as a hurricane while making landfall. And if you look about 50 to 75 miles inland, the National Weather Service does actually keep this as a hurricane. So that's indicative that when it makes landfall, it will likely be a strong Cat 1 to a weak Category 2, maybe even a bit stronger, according to the National Weather Service. So that is quite interesting to see, and I think the models really do support that. So if we switch to the ensemble plots, you can see with this system, unlike Marco, there's very good consensus that landfall will be somewhere in this region right here. Somewhere in here is where we're going to see landfall. Basically the border between Louisiana and Texas. Maybe a bit east, maybe a bit west, but essentially the main area will be right around here. If we go to intensity, we can see almost all the models do intensify this into a Cat 1 hurricane once it enters the Gulf of Mexico, with some taking it into Cat 2 or maybe even stronger status. If we switch to the GFS model right here, this is the 500 millibar geopotential height. You can see that this is 12Z Wednesday, August 26th. It's a pretty strong Cat 1 hurricane, pressure at 982 millibars. And then if we go further through time, it makes landfall at around 973 millibars, which would be, I believe, a Cat 2 hurricane, a weak Cat 2 hurricane. So that is pretty significant. Cat 2 hurricane on top of the impacts from Marco would be quite devastating for a region to see back-to-back hurricanes. Definitely very rare and definitely very damaging. There we go. So again, if it does make landfall here, I think, which is what's likely going to happen, I think we're going to see lots of damage, lots of flooding too, with two very rainfall-filled systems. Things will be quite bad. I think the state of Louisiana and even Texas might declare a state of emergency in the next couple of hours. Now, if we go to the European model, you can see the European is not quite as strong as the GFS. The European has this system making landfall with essentially weak tropical storm status, which is something I do not agree with, and here's why. First of all, we have another hurricane model, the HMON, and this actually does have it as a Cat 2 hurricane when making landfall, maybe even a bit stronger, 953 millibars. That's a Cat 3 hurricane, maybe even a weak Category 4. So again, I think the potential for this system to strengthen is definitely much higher. The ceiling for the system is much higher than what we have with Marco because of the lower wind shear and because of, again, the very warm sea surface temperature anomalies. And that's indicated right here. This is the GEFS ensemble, and you can see that unlike Marco, Laura does not have that much wind shear. In fact, almost very little. You can see the upper level winds are coming straight in from the southeast, and Laura is expected to go straight to the south. Is going to go straight northwest. So you have both wind fields lining up completely, and that is essentially an ideal wind shear environment. Very minimal wind shear, coupled with those very warm sea surface temperatures, I think is going to provide an ideal environment for intensification. The only limiting factor, I think, with Laura is going to be its fast forward speed. If that is the case, I think it will not have that much time to really strengthen, which could definitely sort of hinder its intensification because it simply will run out of time before it reaches land. And I think that's good news if you are in Louisiana or Texas. It will definitely limit its strengthening just a touch. But again, with the GFS model showing a very strong Cat 2 hurricane, some of the hurricane models showing Cat 3 strength, I think this system definitely could intensify quite a bit. It's already looking very good on satellite. Once it gets past Cuba, it's going to have about 400 miles of open space to really just get its act together before slamming into the southeast, particularly Louisiana, right after Marco. So again, very dangerous scenario here. If we go back to the GFS, I want to show you the exact timing. The GFS has it making landfall late or very early Thursday morning, while the European has it making landfall very early Wednesday morning. So again, the timing still needs to be worked out. The National Weather Service has it making landfall right around early morning Thursday. So I think that GFS has a better handle on this system because the European has it a bit weaker. So I think most likely right now, Laura will be impacting Louisiana right around 12 to 9 a.m. Thursday, with Marco impacting Louisiana right around late afternoon on Monday. And now finally, that's it, I think. So that's basically it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, got your doubts clarified, and got some better ideas and clarification with the system. Again, I think Laura is the one that has the potential to intensify much more than Marco. I think Marco will be limited by the wind shear and dry air from that being forced upon it from that jet streak, while Laura will have very warm sea surface temperature anomalies coupled with very minimal wind shear. So again, I think the back-to-back potential landfall from these two systems could be potentially catastrophic for the state of Louisiana and East Texas. So again, I think if you're in that area, if you're in this area right here, you need to pay very careful attention to the forecast for the next 2, 3, 4 days and really be on top of things because things could be turning very dangerous over the next few days. So again, guys, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.